This is the Weigh In podcast by Benoit Chestnut. And on this week's Weigh In, we come in to talk to you, the fans of the Weigh In, about Saul Canelo Alvarez scheduling another fight and it not being Terence Crawford. So the big looming question is Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford. I would like to know who you guys think is going to win. Weigh in the comment section. This is a marquee matchup that I think Terence Crawford and Canelo would be a good fight, but it seems to be yet again Canelo not going and fighting Terence Crawford. In other news for Canelo, he has been stripped of the IBF belt due to a mandatory challenge by the IBF. So they wanted him to face a certain opponent, and he decided he did not want to face it. So they have stripped the belt, which makes Canelo no longer undisputed. And another topic to be coming on this podcast for today is big things to be talking about is that fight for Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson fight where people were literally getting up from that fight. So another thing you can weigh in the comment section about is, do you think Shakur Stevenson is ready for Gervonta Tank Davis? Do you think Shakur Stevenson has what it takes to beat Gervonta Tank Davis? Is he the one to stop Gervonta Tank Davis? But if you ask me here first on the Weigh In podcast, I'm with Gervonta Tank Davis. I do not think Shakur Stevenson has what it takes. After that last fight, it didn't really look like he was ready to do some of the things he had to do. It was a fight where you would have thought he was going to go in there and knock him out. First and foremost, you know, great thing that he had the fight in Newark, New Jersey. He stayed, he had a home fight for all his fans, invited out the Boys and Girls Club, but you got to go in there and you got to pop out. You got to show out. You got to show out for your fans and your kids of the Boys and Girls Club. You got to go there and you've got to make sure you win. You got to make sure you knock your opponent out. And it's just one thing to sit there and say is that, the thing saying here is you could say us podcasters, we wouldn't know. I did partake in boxing. I would know. It's not easy to knock a guy out, but you got to go in there, you got to knock a guy out. You got to really show for that homecoming fight. And I really think you got to do it. And I think the big word to be talking about is that you got to go out and do it. And I think he's been wanting to have Gervonta Tank Davis, and that is going to be an interesting matchup if it is scheduled, if it is done, because I know it was said that Lomachenko backed off of wanting to fight Gervonta Tank Davis just so Shakur Stevenson could fight him. But after seeing that last Shakur fight, do we think Shakur Stevenson is ready? That is something that might be worth talking about. Also, another thing to say is Canelo running from Terence Crawford? Is Canelo running? Or can they not come to agreement? Because it's seeming like every time we think it's going to be that Canelo Crawford fight, it's not happening. Now, I do know Crawford had a fight scheduled while Canelo was scheduling a fight, but are we ever going to see Canelo Crawford? Is it ever going to happen? It's one of those things that we say to ourselves, are we going to see that matchup? Will it happen? Is it going to happen? But if you ask me, I want to see it. I want to see Crawford Canelo, Terence Crawford versus Saul Canelo Alvarez. I want to see it. I do want to see that marquee matchup. Another fight to talk about is Jake Paul. Jake Paul had his fight. He took out Mike Perry. And it was one of those things where you say, okay, Mike Tyson was out and Mike Perry steps in, like the show must go on, but yet again, not another boxer. How many times is he going to fight an influencer, a guy outside of the sport? What we'd like to see him do is go down the list of boxers that are on the ranking and just get a fight against one of those guys. One of those guys, WBC, WBA, IBF. Go down the ranking and get a fight with one of those guys. Go put one of those guys on the canvas. Because if you do 3, 4, multiple of those guys, you keep going and going and going, how many times you're going to knock out a guy on the ranking before you get that chance to become a world champ? And recently, in other news, within this past week and month, Jake Paul saying he's going to try to box in the next Olympics. He's going to try to make the next Olympics. That's great, but when you have your goals and your eyes set and seen on one thing, you try to keep yourself focused. First, he says he wants a title. Now he's turned his focus to wanting to win the Olympics. I'm not saying you can't do both, but if you want to do high level Olympic competition, you're going to have to start fighting and boxing. Boxers, not a guy from bare knuckle, not an influencer. Boxers, boxers, boxers that are ranked, boxers that are going through it. The only boxer so far called that he's fought, I mean, there were two of them, he had Andre who he fought, and then he had Tommy Fury, but that Tommy Fury was a great fight, but you didn't knock him out. So you kind of think for Jake Paul, you've got to go out and you've got to fight boxers. You've got to line up the boxers. You've got to do it. I understand you're saying you're bringing eyes to the sport, but let's get a boxer in the ring with you. Let's bring a boxer in the ring with you so that it's a boxer getting out there. So it's a boxer going left and right in the ring, toe to toe, standing up. And I think that's one thing that we look at that could be really good. Paul, if he goes up against boxers, could be different. You never know. You can learn from it. You can be better from it. And that's one thing that we would like to see happen. We'd like to see him get up and go up against a boxer the same way we'd like to see Tank Davis versus Shakur Stevenson. We'd like to see it happen. In other words, we're going to swing around to the other one, Devin Haney. Let's just weigh in on Devin Haney. What do you think about Devin Haney? Where do you stand fit on the Devin Haney situation? Who does he fight next? How do you pick up from where you left off? You lost. Well, how do you pick up where you left off? Whether what happened in the verdict between the Garcia matchup, all things aside, how do you pick up where you left off? Where do you pick up? Where are you going to go? You got to take those next steps. You got to look and say, hey, we got to move on here. And, I'm starting to notice a lot of, I think this is, I think they've always been doing this in boxing, but you're seeing not a lot of guys want to get 2-3 belts per weight class. I like what Crawford's doing, wanting to make himself. He's undisputed in 2 separate weight classes and wanting to go and do it more and more and more. And another thing we're going to bring up, did Errol Spence Jr. after his accident, do you believe he has not fought the same? And, I kind of think he's a little different since his accident, but, do ring in on that comment section about Errol Spence. That's one of the things we sit here and we can say. Another thing we're going to sit here and bring up today is, in boxing, there's a lot of things going on. What do you think about that last Tyson Fury fight? Weigh in on that, the last Tyson Fury fight. I think great fight. I think you can learn from a lot of these fights. A lot of good fights that are out there going on. A lot of good events going on. I think it's a lot of good things. I like the boxing card. You're seeing a lot of these guys show who they are and who they are. Like you look at Gervonta Tank Davis. Frank Martin said he was going to be that guy. He could stop him. Frank Martin made key mistakes. He tried to conserve his energy and was standing up. When you fight Gervonta Tank Davis, it's great to box in, box out, jab in, jab out. It's great. But if you start standing up in front of him where he can land a lot of those huge power shots, you're now going to be relying on whether your chin can hold up. And this is a common thing of, if the chin doesn't hold up, you have now lost. You have now not won. You have now put yourself in a situation where your chin has not held up. It has not gone the way it's supposed to. You've been knocked out, and you don't want to put yourself in that situation. You got to box in, box out. I think for Frank Martin, had he gone out and won the first 7 rounds and then said, yeah, I got to now conserve my energy, different story. You've won 7 rounds. You're going to make it hard for the other opponent to come back. You might possibly win on the scorecard, depending on how those 7 rounds go and how they fall. But that's a good chance to say you may or may not win. You may or may not go out there and win the event. You may or may not do certain things that you have wanted to do. And that's one of the things that I'm saying here is that, had he come up with a better strategy, a different strategy, that might have been the difference. That might have been the difference for whether what goes on. And I think that is a very big difference. And that is a huge difference in the way the fight went. He tried to conserve his energy. He got knocked out. It's very simple. And I think one thing for Frank Martin, had he done it a little differently, go out there, try to win early 4, 5, 7 rounds, Put the pressure on Davis. Make him have to fully go in there and really have to fight hard, because now he's down on the cards. He's not winning on the cards. Now you're going to make him have to come back. And I do think if you go out there and you really put him on his back and you really do certain things, when you go across that, you really make it hard for your opponent to go do some of the things he has to do. You make it really hard for certain things to have to be done. And I think that's one thing you can do. And Frank Martin didn't do it. Frank Martin didn't do it. He couldn't do it. I think that Shakur Stevenson fight could have been a lot better. I think Terrence Crawford's fight was really good. I think that, I want to see him up against Canelo. I want to see Canelo's next fight. I want to see him knock that guy out. I want the guy knocked out. I want to see some of these marquee matchups set up. I want to see Tank Davis Stevens. I want to see everything set up, because this is the way. This is the way forward. As we say, as we said with the Jake Paul, Mike Perry, the show must go on. You have to understand the show must go on. And at this point, you got to set up those big matchups, because this is the things we want to see. This is what we want to see. We want to get in there. We want to see the hard fighting. We want to see it go toe to toe. A guy drops, it shows who's the better fighter. We want to see it happen. And lately in boxing, there have been a lot of great fights, a lot of great fights. A lot of good stuff that has been done, and it shows, where boxing is at as a place. Recently, the Olympic boxing went on. If you didn't catch it, some of those fights were really good, really great fights going on. It was really good stuff. And I think that, Olympic boxing was looking really good. A lot of good boxing out of there, a lot of good stuff with the Olympics going on. And I think, it's a lot of good things learning. And I think I can see why Jake Paul says he wants in on that. But at the same time, how are you going to prepare yourself for these guys that have been boxers left and right? You got to prepare yourself with boxers. It's more than just setting up boxers in your training camp. Now you've got to get out there. You've got to fight boxers. You fought Tommy Fury. You fought Andre, who was a boxer. Line them up, more and more boxers. Keep going. No more influencers. No more of that stuff. Boxers, fight boxers. You got to get out there and fight the boxers. That's what you have to do, because when you get out there and you get up against a boxer, now you're going to get that experience. You're going to gain something from it. You're going to gain endurance. You're going to gain a lot of things from those fights, for why I say you have to get out there and fight boxers. You got to get those boxers. And that's one thing I'm going to say, is you got to get out there and fight those boxers. And that's why I'm going to say that, because he'll learn from it. He'll get better. He may possibly get himself ranked, maybe possibly get a world title. But if you're not fighting a boxer, how are they, or how will they schedule you with boxers, schedule you with all this stuff, if you're not doing some of the things you're supposed to be doing? So you got to be doing it. So that's one of the things I'm bringing on to say today, on the Weigh In Podcast. I wanted to bring to you a nice, quick, short video, just letting you know this is me coming back. This is the Weigh In coming back. I'm going to try to get you longer videos, but for now, I'm going to be doing stuff like this so that we can still have the Weigh In. So now we're going to be doing, like we said on previous episodes, where it may be just me, or it may be just Sebastian, or we're going to be the episode together. Well, this is me coming out saying, I'm going to say that I'm sorry we haven't been posting, but from here on out, I'm going to make sure I get that video out for you guys as much as I can. And I'm going to try to get a video out. I know we talked about that 2 days a week. I'm going to try to shoot for getting you a video out the minimum 2 days a week, but I'm not going to set a maximum. I'm just going to, as many videos as I can get out, and stay quick with the news. I'm going to try to get it out for you guys. I'm going to try to do what I can, because this is the Weigh In, and that's what I want to do. I want to get it out. So sorry for this one being short. It's the first one back, and I'm going to try to, over time, make these longer and longer, so that we can have full episodes going. And I still am going to be looking into working on getting our old episodes on Spotify. But this is the Weigh In by Benoit Chestnut. This is a video for you guys, and see you on the next one.